Record.
I'd like to call a meeting to order and please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the EDC meeting, August 26, 2020. And we'd like to have roll call. Craig, could you call the members, please?
John DeYoung,
Present.
Kelly Stoming. Don't believe Kelly's.
Yes, she's
Okay,
absent.
yep, okay. Joy Lax Salinas,
Present.
Robert Godoy,
Present.
Adam Robertson,
Present.
Erica Hill,
Present.
Carl Madsen,
Present.
Joseph Berry,
Present.
Town Manager Craig Phillips is present. Brian Blazak, I do not believe has joined us yet. Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 members, which does constitute a quorum for business this
Thank you,
evening.
Craig. We still do not, folks, have a recording secretary, so we have no approval on any minutes yet, but the town is working on getting somebody in place. So there's a call out here to anybody in the community, or if you know of somebody for that position is open, and we're willing to take them on the EDC committee. We're going to go to new business and old business, and Craig has a update for us on the licensings that is possible for restaurants or businesses that are coming to St. John or moving from other areas. So Craig?
Okay, so at our last meeting, I think I updated you that I had reached out to our council, for the attorneys that we work with, and that are familiar with the requirements for liquor license districts. And since that time, they provided me some additional background information to verify some of the limits associated with that. And essentially what the statute says is that it does not get very specific with regard to what a water body is. And so I had told you that I wanted to explore whether or not West Creek and the extension of that in the form of the St. John Ditch would qualify. So what I did is I worked with Jason actually to put together a couple of maps that showed properties located within the TIF district, which is also a requirement in order to be within the liquor license district, that are associated with a riverfront project, which we would have to have some further discussion about what a riverfront project would consist of, that are within 1,500 feet of the edge of non-buildable areas adjacent to a waterway would look like. And so I had Jason put us together a map showing that kind of based on those parameters. And what I will do is, if you want, I can just stand by the podium and kind of show this to you.
Yeah, as long as the folks at home can see that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do the best I
Yep.
can. So it's not going to be in great detail, but I can just explain to you what the colors on the map represent, and that we'll have to take a closer look. And what I'll do is I'll schedule some time with you to go over this in more detail.
That'd be
After
great.
this meeting, but I just want to talk in general about what this shows. And again, I think I explained, Jason, where should I stand for this?
It won't, I'm doing it over here, so you can just, yeah, you can just do it up there and they'll see it.
Okay. And as I explained to you at the last meeting, it's ultimately up to the town council whether or not this is something that they would like to pursue or not. So,
Right.
I'm gonna use this chair. Will that work?
Well, they're seeing it live, so,
Okay.
Oh, they are, okay.
Yeah.
But the public can see
yep, they can see
this
it.
if I hold it up.
No, they're seeing what's on the
Oh,
screen.
they're seeing what's on the screen. Oh, okay. So essentially what you have here is a map that shows roughly north to south from 93rd Avenue. down to 109th Avenue. And the area shown in blue are the areas that fall within TIF districts in town. So as I said, one of the requirements is that if any established district is put in place, it has to be within areas that are within TIF districts. Furthermore, it would need to be within commercially zoned areas. And the map that I have, I've started just myself to delineate those areas, so you don't see that on that map yet, or do you actually? Can you see
Should
those?
see 'em.
Okay, so the light red outlines are areas that are within commercially zoned properties. Then you have two different colors. One is a kind of a pink or purplish color. That represents the area that falls within 1,500 feet of the undevelopable area adjacent to West Creek. And that goes up to the point where West Creek kind of becomes Bull Run. There's a Y where it kind of becomes Bull Run off to the northwest, and then St. John Ditch off to the northeast, which is roughly across the street from Alsop Nursery,
Which is right in here.
which is written on there too,
Yep.
if you look closely. And I apologize, this was my working copy. This is a work in progress, so I apologize that this is not, in final form. But essentially that area in pink, and then kind of where that intersects with TIF districts shows up kind of as a purple, if you will.
Right.
That's one option based on West Creek. I also had Jason map the St. John Ditch, and I have verified that St. John Ditch does carry water. It does have water in it year-round, so it could potentially qualify as a waterway. As recently as last week, I verified this, and we haven't had a lot of rain in a while, so it's probably a reasonable assumption. But the area shown in yellow would be the 1,500-foot buffer associated with that extension of West Creek in the form of St. John Ditch. So one of the things I was curious about was would some of the properties that we are most concerned with, like the Kmart property, Shops 96, and some of the larger developable properties along 41 fall into these areas. And Shops 96 is a little iffy. It looks like perhaps maybe one of the outlots and maybe just a touch of the largest lot barely is touched by the buffer, so it's probably not the greatest candidate for this. And unfortunately, neither is the Kmart property. But there are a large number of properties within the 41 corridor to the south of there that would. And so that's kind of where we're at this point, is just showing you, putting together the map to show you guys if we were to propose establishing a district, these are the areas that would be feasible within. So happy to answer any questions you have about this at this point. Like I said, this is very preliminary. But yeah, just happy to answer any questions
Craig,
you have.
do you have to have be by a waterway to get a license in town if?
You do, and it
Yep.
also has to be associated with a riverfront project within a TIF district. So
Okay,
that's something we're gonna have to further explore as well. So don't know whether this is completely feasible or not, going this route or not yet, but our plan is to explore this in more
now,
detail.
if you don't use the waterway avenue and some licenses come available, can they be put anywhere in the community?
Those would be made available on the open market.
Yep.
And they would be able to be purchased by anybody who owns
Very good.
property in town.
Very good.
These specific, as related to the watershed district or the
Mhm.
waterfront district,
Riverfront, yeah.
they would only be leased licenses, correct?
Well, they're basically, I don't want to use the word lease, but basically a small fee is charged by the state annually for the use of that license, and it is tied to it's specifically tied to a property. It's not transferable, and it's also not owned by that entity, so it's not a commodity that can be, bought or sold. So it's essentially kind of a use permit, if you will. I don't want to really call it a lease because it's not. It's permission to use a license
Okay.
at that location. So definitely more to be done, but I just wanted to show you the progress up to this point and kind of where we're at. And I think my plan would be to look into this further and discuss some of these details
Sure.
with you, John, as president of the board. So anyway, that's where we're at with that.
When the census comes out, so for the people at home that are watching us,
Right.
It was told to me that possibly 2 more licenses will be available.
It depends on the outcome of the census. So basically, there is a number, that number used to be 1 license per 1,500 residents
Okay.
based on the census. Now, our last census, I believe in 2010 was 14,800 and some change, if I'm not mistaken.
Right?
So depending on how many extra 1,500 people, you know, each one of those blocks of 1,500 people would qualify us for a new license. Now, what happens is that those licenses that become available, I believe, are offered through they're offered either through a lottery system or some sort of system through the state where they make those available through a bidding or lottery type process.
Right.
I'm not quite certain what the state's current process is, what they intend to do based on this census. But that'll help us determine automatically how many more licenses become available for St. John.
Okay. So, once these come available, is the town able to get some of those licenses and going into that bidding process?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't believe so. I think those are only available to private property owners, but that's something we would have to look into a little bit
See, if
more
we're
in
trying to
depth.
procure.
I don't know if towns can hold licenses
Yeah.
for speculative purposes.
Yeah, but if we're trying to entice businesses to come here,
Mhm.
that would be a nice thing to have in your pocket to offer,
Yeah,
saying
we'd have
that
to
you have a
explore that.
restaurant and banquet hall, this could be
Yeah,
available.
We'd have to explore that
Yeah.
further, honestly.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
we'd have to delve a little bit deeper into the statutes to figure that out, so.
Very
How
good.
far southwest will this go?
Well, the farthest southwest that it could possibly go based on the current commercial zoning would be basically the northwest corner, roughly the northwest corner of 109th and 41. There is one parcel, or 2 parcels, I believe it is, that are not zoned commercially at the very corner. I don't know why that is exactly, but they're not. So those 2 parcels would not qualify. You can see that little kind of jog there at the very
Yeah.
south end.
Yep,
That's why that looks like that. But then you can see where Chop House is, all the properties adjacent to that to the north,
yep,
leading up to the shrine. Some properties across the street, well, actually, every property across the street from 109th up to basically 101st Place would fall directly within kind of that first area that I outlined.
mm-hmm,
And then from there, all the properties on the east side of 41.
this
from
is about 101st here, Craig?
101st Place.
Place,
Yeah, and then
okay.
from 101st Place north to about halfway
101st
between
Place.
96 and 97th. I don't know, does Standard Drive really still exist?
Not any longer now.
That's what I thought. So it's kind of, it falls about halfway between 97th and 96th. And then there's a smattering of properties on the west side. Within the yellow area, all of those are currently developed. Basically, that would include community health,
Yep.
and a couple of bank properties and I'm trying to think what else is on the corner of 97th. Anyway, but that's possibility if those properties were to redevelop into something else. And then on farther south, there are a couple of properties on the west side, kind of adjacent to the area that we refer to as the floodway along West Creek. And that's not very deep, but there are some potentially developable properties there, basically between the shrine and where St. John Ditch comes out, immediately adjacent to 41 across from Alsip. So, yeah, that's kind of.
Are we able to get these maps for the members? Just so they have a reference of what we're talking, and they can put it in their folder and,
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll tidy this one up,
yep,
and I'll work with Jason to clean it up, and then we'll get a copy of that to you guys.
that would be great. I appreciate that, thank you. Any other questions by any of the members? Nope.
Are we on the phone? Or anybody on the video call doesn't have any?
No, that was very informative. That was
Yeah.
that was good info.
Okay.
And you can all see the maps we've been talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
That was
okay.
really helpful.
Okay, and again, I apologize, they're handwritten at this point, and some elements are handwritten, but
Yep.
it's a working copy, so.
Yep.
All right,
Well,
thanks.
Craig, thank you very much for
Yep.
giving us an update on that.
Okay.
Now, can you also give us a quick update on some of the projects, where we're at on Shops on 96, and maybe what's happening with the Franciscan property? Where the
So,
old-
with regard to Shops 96, I can tell you what the town is currently, where the town is currently at in terms of the efforts we're engaged in. We have awarded the ground improvement portion of the road project to Goff Construction, and are having, actually tomorrow, are having a kickoff meeting, basically what we call a pre-construction meeting with Goff and other representatives from the town and our engineers. And so we anticipate that that portion of the road project will take about 8 months. What we're doing there is, for those of you who are not familiar with it, basically what we're doing is we're bringing in loads of soil to put on top of basically the existing Houghton muck, as it's called. It's a very, very watery soil, basically, that's on a significant part of that area that the road has to be constructed on.
And that road's gonna be across the back, running the
From where it's currently constructed.
horizontal to the tracks, is that correct?
Kind of. From where it currently terminates as it's constructed today, it will make an S curve, an S curve over to Joliet
Oh, yeah,
and T into Joliet at a new standard intersection just northwest of the tracks. Northwest of the, what are those? Norfolk Southern tracks. Not to be confused with the CSX
So that'll-
tracks.
That'll be a light or,
There will be a signal at 41 and 96th place,
Right.
but not at Joliet and 96th place. That will be a three-way stop.
okay. Three-way stop, okay.
and will there be a roundabout there?
There will not be a roundabout there. It will be a standard T intersection at that location.
And that's far enough from the tracks where that road comes out?
Correct.
Good,
Yep. It was shifted slightly to farther northwest
yep.
and redesigned so that, yeah, it definitely meets the separation requirements for the railroad and all the safety considerations obviously associated with an intersection.
I know a lot of the residents want to know that, and
Right.
how
And
that
then,
access. And then coming off of Joliet, 241, you'll only be able to turn to the north, or will you be able to turn both ways, north and
there'll
south?
be a right in and right out configuration where you'll
Yep.
be able to turn eastbound onto Joliet or turn out of Joliet going northbound on 41.
Okay,
All other movements will be restricted. And the other thing I was going to say is that project is, the first phase of the project, what we're calling the ground improvement portion of the project, where I said we're placing the soil on top of the existing muck. Basically, what we're doing is we're pushing, by weight of the soil, we're pushing the water out of that soil. It's called surcharge and wick drain. So the surcharge is the pressing down of the soil, and the water is removed from that area through what are called wick drains. And those are then conveyed out to existing drainage channels that we have in that area. So that's how that process will work. And then the regular road construction on top of that resulting newly compacted soil
yep,
will take place next spring.
okay, very good.
And then likely the road will open hopefully late spring, early summer of next year.
Very good. So, any other questions from the members?
Yes, it's Carl. Is there a final list available of the retail establishments that plan on going in, and what's the approximate opening?
We don't currently have a list of those. I think that the COVID-19 situation has put that a little bit in a delay, a little bit of delay experience because of that. I do know that, I think we're all aware that the Centaur Bank is going to be built on the corner, and then next to that is Crew Car Wash. And then, as I understand it, there would be one pad that would be on the northeast corner that is supposed to be a fast food restaurant. Aside from that, we're not aware of exactly what is going in each of the building sites at this point. And like I said, that's kind of delayed due to, I think, the COVID-19
Has that been
situation. And because
confirmed?
of the delays that we experienced in our project.
Yeah. Has that restaurant been confirmed, or?
I don't believe it's been confirmed.
Okay.
So,
Do we know when the car wash will be complete? I understand it's, like you said, delayed due to COVID concern or reasons.
I
but-
don't off the top of my head. I would have to check with Rick Eberly, our building and planning director, to see what he understands is the timeline associated with that project.
Okay.
Okay, that brings us the conclusion of new and old business. On our agenda tonight is a conceptual discussion on a facade or beautification project. And what we'd like to do today is try to come up with ideas that we can present to the town council members at a future date, but I'd like to talk about qualifications, funding, limits on the project, and then maybe the chamber involvement and co-partnering with maybe other businesses. So we're just going to kind of have an open discussion here. And first of all, if we can come up with some qualifications, I'd like to write all those down, and we'll establish some sort of agenda here that we can present. So the floor is open to all. Yep.
Do we have a number involved? Let's just say that you have 20 businesses, and is there a certain amount that we can, get to a point where they say they want to spend 10,000 and we would match 5, but do we have how many 5,000s or how many, you know what I'm saying?
At this point, there's no budget for that, any of that at this point. So what we can do is do it in increments, and as funds are available from either a contribution from the town or business or other partners, but I think we need to establish some sort of guidelines that we can follow up to a certain dollar amount. Now, if you say $1,000, I don't know what that's going to, accomplish, but if you want to make a limit or a starting point at 5,000, let's do that. And we also can write down what, ways to fund this project, limits on a project, who qualifies for the project. And we were talking a little bit before our meeting that it'd be existing brick and mortar businesses that have a current business license in the town of St. John. Would like to see that as a starting point. And maybe somebody doesn't need a facade, but they need landscaping. So we need to kind of put all these things together and try to present something that if we happen to get $1,000 or a $3,000 or $5,000 grant or money to hand out, then we can establish some sort of ground guidelines.
I guess, John, question.
So-
So if one question that should be answered is, do we want this to be a grant, or do we want this to be some sort of forgivable loan? Forgivable loans are more complicated, obviously, then you have promissory notes and
Yeah.
things like that involved.
Well, I would like to see it being a grant, that it's not a forgivable loan. I think give somebody that, they can do the project, turn in their receipts. I don't know how the other members feel, but I think, using people in your town to do these projects would be maybe a qualification. I'm kind of talking out loud here, but, I'd like
or-
some input.
Like, up to a 50% reimbursement up to being that, you get 40% if you're not using other town businesses for labor or material. If you are and you can prove it, then you would get a full 50%. So it could be incremental based
So-
on if they use in-town businesses or not for the project.
So,
Okay?
so this is Carl. What's the stated goal? I mean, are there particular businesses that we think would benefit more than others? And if not, I would think that we should probably create a list and approach them separately. I think that, I'm not quite sure, I'm sorry, I was not at the last meeting and we don't have the minutes yet. I'm not quite sure what we're trying to achieve, a modernization, some sort of standardization of the visual appeal that's presented to people moving through the town, approaching retail. What are we trying to achieve
Well,
with this?
it's more of a beautification. So you want to make the town presentable to future business and current business. Presentable may be a bad word, but if people have a little bit of deteriorating.
No, I understand the concept of beautification. So I understand. I'm thinking, whom are we trying to beautify? Just in general, or is there a stretch that we think requires more attention right now than others?
Well, would probably be any businesses in town that are a legacy business that have been here for 50 plus years, and those are kind of the ones we would want to help out first anyway because of their dedication to the town. So I think that would be good. If we're, as an example, in a city up north, my father-in-law benefited from this. He owns a business that's a garage, towing and auto repair. And the building itself was built in the 1920s. So something like that definitely could use improvements because, the business owners make improvements as they can throughout the years, especially in times like now with COVID and the lack of business just for these people coming into town. A little bit of added help would not only increase the beautification of the town, but it would further the businesses of the building and show that they're appreciated to keep them in the town as they are and they have been for years.
So something else I'd like to throw out is, when you look at the 41 corridor, it becomes evident pretty quickly that there's kind of a core area that really, it would benefit from this. And that would kind of basically be from, on the south end, from about 97th, maybe up to, what we'll say, maybe Wall Street, whatever, something in that area, just obviously right around St. John Mall.
Yep.
If you were to stay south of the tracks. So I would say that becomes pretty evident that that's where you're really looking at, because everything south of there is relatively new, or it's of a vintage that's been built within the last, say, 20 years. Maybe with one or two exceptions as you go farther south, but it would seem that the core area would be between roughly 97th and, say, Wall Street, for example. If you were to go north of the tracks, then obviously you're getting in, again, you're kind of getting into, in many cases, a newer construction.
Yep.
So I think it's those older core areas that you guys want to focus on.
Sure.
I might just suggest, 97th place, or sorry, 97th being kind of the south boundary of that. And maybe, like I said,
So-
roughly Wall Street being the north boundary of that, just as an idea to throw out there.
Yeah, but do we want to limit this to the 41 corridor?
Well, where else would it be?
Well,
Oh, maybe a little on Joliet,
this is
you're saying. A
Erica.
little bit on Joliet between 41 and the tracks. Yeah, I didn't mean to exclude that, sorry. I kind of consider that whole same area. But yeah, thanks for, clarifying that. So Joliet between 41 and the tracks, we'll say, is also obviously a core area.
Now, can I ask a question?
I've
Did they do the selection by a lottery, or did they do it by
an app.
committees, or
No, it's an application process and a grant.
application process? Okay.
Now, John, I've been involved.
Yeah, so I've done
Sorry, I
I've
didn't-
done some research on this, and so what I frequently see from other, towns across the U.S. A lot of it is the maximum grant amount is like 10,000. It ranges from 5 to 10,000. The owner has to submit plans with, beforehand for approval. It has to be completed within 6 months of rewarding the grant. Only commercial buildings, nothing residential. Only one grant is awarded within like a 10-year period if this is something that we will continue. Things like that. I don't think that we should publicly or we should include saying this is only available to these people or certain exclusions.
Right. Can't do that.
Right.
I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, I think we could keep these things in mind when awarding the grants. But I also don't think realistically, some of those newer buildings, like you were saying, that are built like 20 years ago, like I would doubt that they would apply for something like this because it's not really necessary for them. I think we're all aware of this, some of the locations that could use this. I think on our own time and as, members, we could always approach certain businesses and say, hey, did you know this is available? In case you're interested. But, I don't think we necessarily want to, say only, this area is allowed to apply. You just never know. But those are some things, and the grants can be used for things like painting, safety lighting, awning, signage. I think it's a great idea for landscaping, like limited landscaping, to also be included in the grant. And I think it should be a grant. I think if it was some sort of loan, that we would not get much participation.
Yeah, definitely need to be a grant. I think we should also include decking and possibly concrete patio. I know a business.
Yeah.
I know a business in
Great.
town right now that he did it on his own, and he took the financial hit, but that's what he had to do in order to get more people in. So that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I agree.
John, if I-
Pergolas, that type
Yeah.
of thing,
Absolutely.
John, if I could add this, so I've been involved in directly being in charge of the establishment of several of these programs in my career
Okay?
in Valparaiso and Michigan City, and prior to that, even Elkhart. There are a number of examples in Northwest Indiana as well. They're all done slightly differently. Obviously, the one in Hammond is different than the ones in other communities, but there are lots of examples of how these are done. So we don't really need to necessarily reinvent the wheel, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and like I said, I've been directly involved in charge of establishment of several of these, and it's been everything from downtown areas to more retrofitting existing corridors. Two of the examples I can point you to is I was involved in the establishment of one called the Eastgate Corridor in Valparaiso, which is near the university along Lincoln Way to the east of downtown, and then on Calumet Ave, which is the main north-south road leading out of downtown, kind of northeast out of downtown, I should say. And that was an older, more well-established corridor that we did some retrofits of buildings on. So I have a lot of familiarity with those programs, and they're, like I said, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of
I think
templates out there.
if all members can submit their ideas, and then at the next meeting, we can kind of formulate and discuss, kind of put together an agenda and a wish list on money. And the other thing I would like to ask is, Craig, did you have involvement with the local chambers along with the town participation, or and what do the members think about that? Handing, letting the chamber hand out a beautification, and we kind of say we have X and amount to donate, and
I mean, I've seen different models. I myself haven't been involved in one that directly involves a chamber. They're primarily done through either municipal funds or TIF funds. In our case, I'm not sure how much of that's available, but we can look into that, obviously. There may be, there could be chamber members involved on on an ad hoc committee specifically set up for the review of applications, that kind of thing. There could be ways, obviously, for them to get involved. But as far as, you can obviously be creative in how you fund something like this, and if the chamber wants to get involved in that, that's fine. I myself haven't been involved in one where the chamber was directly involved, but it's not to say it can't be done, so.
Right, right.
What
The
about
ones I've
sub-
done
what-
have ranged from 5,000 to 30,000, and ranged from 20% match up to 50% match, depending on, depending on which community it was, and what area of the community it was in.
I mean, we could also put a limit or somewhat limit is just saying, buildings that were built within the last 10 years, probably don't qualify because those should be pretty updated.
But if you included everybody and they submitted what it was, you could have the committee make the decision, and then you could make that decision like in-house.
Yeah, I don't think we
Yeah.
could do a limitation.
Yeah, that way it includes
Thanks.
everybody, and then you
Yeah.
can see the project itself.
But I do think we need to establish a piece for funding
Funding, yeah.
and get an established dollar figure of a reservoir of funding where this would be pulled from.
Right.
If it's out of reoccurring revenue, set limitations to how much can be taken at given times so that that specific area of funding is kept above a certain threshold. There's a lot of parts to it.
You should also determine whether or not you want this to be available to non-residentially zoned properties, or if you do want to be very specific in terms of limiting it to commercial uses. Because there have been some good examples of where structures that were built as residential homes originally have become either offices or service businesses over the years, and you may or may not want to exclude those, from your program as well. So I think it was mentioned, was it Eric, I think, you that mentioned the idea of it being, residential properties being excluded?
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
I did mention that.
Residentially zoned
Yeah.
properties without question.
Right.
Zoning, I think, is.
Right. 'cause they could've changed the zone.
Residential properties that were built originally as residences but are now used for commercial purposes, you might want to consider including those.
To include them?
Yeah, just a consideration. I've seen some pretty nice renovations of structures like that over the years.
And we do have a few kind of like across from Kmart.
We do.
And Joliet,
Yep.
also
Yeah.
on Joliet,
Mhm.
and yeah. Maybe even on 93rd, depending, right here by Town Hall. in
Yeah,
between.
Right.
there's some on Joliet that, for sure.
There could be some,
Could
I
apply.
don't have the zoning map right in front of me, but, yeah.
Well, if we can secure funding and/or a partnership, considering what the times are, this little project could go a long way to help a struggling business get back on their feet. I think it's worth really kind of going through all this and trying to do what we can as neighborly businesses to try to help them succeed. So I'm thrilled of all these suggestions. I hope everybody's keeping good notes here.
Yeah, I think that, I think it's really timely. I think that, I mean, basically what we could do is, like you said, put down a list of what we think could be, qualifications or for the program. I think that we just have to come up with a dollar figure, and then, the council will say, hey, that's great, we could do that, or how about this different number? I mean, we just have to give a starting point, and then they can tell us what's realistic or not, So
Yep.
that's their responsibility to let us know what's realistic and not. So I think we could just look at other programs and, rely on you for your experience on what you think would be realistic for our size town and budget to propose.
So what I would ask if everybody has my email. They can start emailing me their suggestions on qualifications, funding, project limits, and I'll collect all those, and then we'll try to get a list put together, and then for our next meeting, then we can review and have some more discussion on it, because this will be it's conceptual at this point. It all will depend on the type of funding we can have, and then if somebody goes to a regular chamber meeting, maybe we can ask them on if they have a beautification project, maybe they want to come in on it with us. One thing I was thinking about is when we pay our dues to the chamber, maybe a portion or a stipend of some of those dues, or even a contribution could go into that, and then for a beautification project. So there's a lot of ways to maybe scratch out a few more dollars. So.
Craig, does the state have any available grants that we could pull from that you know of?
It gets a little bit challenging because we are in a group of communities in Lake County that are collectively part of a batch of funding where we basically are considered what are called entitlement communities, where we receive a certain amount of community development block grant funding already from HUD, and the state. The only thing I can think of is we'd have to look at this a little bit more in depth. If there are any buildings that are historic that would qualify for any sort of historic grants, but those are few and far between. There could be historic tax credits available for the restoration of buildings depending on how old they are. Again, I don't know unless we kind of surveyed, what's out there to understand whether or not anybody would qualify for those. And I have been involved in helping facilitate access to historic tax credits before, but as far as just direct grant funds available, not really. And we don't have a historic district in town, a delineated adopted historic district, so it becomes less likely based on that. But it's not to say that we can't find something. It's just not. There's nothing jumping right to the front of my mind in terms of examples I can think of that aren't already affiliated with some other either historic district or program like that. So.
I have a question. Do we want to consider any kind of beautification projects that are, like on town property or something like with the bike trail or anything that would be essentially non-commercial? Grants that we might qualify for that, or say something like improving the US 41 corridor, the appearance, maybe like burying the utility lines, not specifically that, of course, but just as an example of beautification that doesn't necessarily involve one specific business.
Are you possibly talking about, putting potted plants down 41 to spruce up that corridor?
Sure,
Things like
something
that?
Or something like, like a lot of downtowns put those like those fancy ornate lights or something. Just those as examples, of ways to say, even though we don't have a historic corridor, we can sort of make ourselves look a little bit historic because we do have such a long history in the town. Things like that. Again, the bike trails, if there's improvements along there, wayfinder signs, just things like that fall on town property, that don't necessarily involve grants between businesses. Is that something that we want to consider now, or
I would say that's a different program. If the EDC wanted to consider making suggestions to the town about those kinds of things, I'm sure that it would be appropriate for the EDC to make those kinds of suggestions. I don't think that that's the sort of thing that would typically be covered by a facade program. Those are typically private property.
Right.
Someone applies for those, and the property owner applies for those, or a business owner with the permission of the property owner applies for those. Typically, is how that would work. So.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I think it's completely appropriate for this body to make suggestions about, ways we think we could make the town, especially like the 41 corridor and the nearby commercial corridors, more aesthetically pleasing in ways.
Sure.
And I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about streetscape, what we traditionally refer to as streetscaping elements.
Yep.
And most of the time, those kinds of improvements are, very costly, and it would involve town funds, to make those things happen. Now, if there were groups that got together and wanted to donate a little bit of money towards helping something like that happen, obviously the town wouldn't turn that away. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think that's something we should explore too. We could look into and see, what we think we could suggest.
Sure. And I think even with something that, we can certainly throw that on an agenda for a future meeting. But Craig, I know you said you had involvement in Elkhart at one point, right? In
Yeah.
Elkhart, Indiana.
Yeah.
So I was out there actually a year or two ago, and one thing that Elkhart's really rebounded as far as their downtown district, and one thing that they have, I wonder if I could do a screen share. Am I able to do a screen share from here?
Yes, you are. It should be the third button from the left. And I think we lost him.
I think
Oh,
we did.
no.
So I have one question. Are we able to, when we're putting the program, I know that we've got to submit some ideas. I think it'd be great to be able to help bring, the overall aesthetic appearances of our businesses, and especially the older ones, to help them improve. Craig, when you were involved with this in other places, was part of the program also the idea that kind of a consistent town aesthetic for signage and things like that would also be expected to be a part of the facade improvement? So, so there's just kind of a little bit more of a unified approach to just how the town presents itself.
Well, you could take one of two approaches. You could say that, if there's an element of signage that's being upgraded on the property, that signage would need to be brought in conformity with the current standards, the current ordinances, zoning ordinance. Or you could say that if you didn't touch a specific element that's on the property that could be non-conforming, we can't force, by law, we can't force anybody to bring a sign into conformity. You can encourage, if someone's making adjustments to a sign, you can make them bring that sign into conformity with current standards. In fact, you have to, because it wouldn't be, if you're removing something and replacing it, it's got to be done in accordance with the current zoning laws. So there's that.
Yeah, I think our BZA does a good job
Yeah.
of keeping that stuff all in line.
Yeah, and so I think that problem kind of solves itself. It's the elements that you are affecting that have to be brought into conformity. We're not allowed, in the state of Indiana, we're not allowed to amortize signs, for example. We're not allowed to force anybody to bring a sign in conformity, unless it's deemed to be dangerous. That's a whole different situation, and there's a process you have to go through for that. But, anybody that would be replacing a sign, if that sign was currently not in conformity, they would have to replace it with something that was, based on zoning.
If you wanted to share your screen, it's the third button from the left, the one with the
Okay.
up arrow key.
Yeah, actually, as soon as I shared it, it crashed the program. So that's why it booted me out. So I got on real quick. So I'm afraid of So if I'll try and do it one more time, but if in case I get booted, for time's sake, I'll explain it. Craig, so I was in Elkhart anyways, and they had all these beautiful photo wraps that were around the utility boxes that were downtown. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've seen that in communities.
Okay, so they did it was a really cool attraction. As I was going through, I was actually photographing the whole downtown area, and all the utility boxes were were wrapped with various scenes, I believe, of like Elkhart County and the courthouse and just other scenes. And it was really cool. And it took something that was, that's very utilitarian and turned it into an art piece. So it made it, really cool. I don't know how something like that fits into St. John, because it seems like something like that fits into something that's a little bit more of a walkable community, like maybe downtown Valpo or something like that. Like it'd probably be amazing there. But something like that along the 41 corridor,
Yeah.
That's at least something that's more reasonable cost than installing, decorative lighting and stuff like that. So
Yeah, and I think as far as that kind of thing, like the traditional, like we said, streetscape type elements, the only limitations we would have are what we would, if something falls within NDOT's right of way, we would have to get their permission. For example, I know that any signage or any light poles that are installed in NDOT right away have to be of what's called breakaway construction, so that if a vehicle hit it, it breaks away from its base, and it's less likely to cause as much damage or harm.
Okay.
So there's those limitations, but that's just the only thing to keep in mind is if something's within the right of way of 41, you'd have to get NDOT's permission. But if it's on private property, that's not an issue. So
gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
With regard to people's improvements on their own properties, that wouldn't be an issue. If we wanted to do streetscaping, oftentimes that's within right-of-way. And if that's not possible from the standpoint of NDOT's approvals, then if there's space to do so, one thing we could consider would be getting easements on adjacent properties to allow for some of those improvements to go in, because you can make the argument that those kind of improvements improve property values adjacent to them. So if you put in decorative lighting or you put in landscaping and that sort of thing, in an easement on the front of someone's property, it's clearly going to help improve the value of their property. So oftentimes people are willing to consider those kinds of things if they feel they're benefiting from them.
Greg, when you did these streetscapes, who maintained them then? Did that fall back on the town? or
In
front of each business, they were responsible for watering and
Yeah.
sprucing and,
Yeah, and I've been involved in many streetscaping projects over the course of my career. Everything from lighting, decorative benches, planters, other forms of landscaping, bridge enhancements, that kind of stuff. And without exception, if it's within NDOT's right of way, the town would be required to maintain, and you'd have to sign a maintenance agreement with NDOT
Yep.
if that's approved.
okay. All right. Does anybody have any more questions for Craig? No? Well, if you would please send me all your suggestions on qualifications, funding, limits, and I'll collect those. I'll try to put together an agenda for our next meeting to kind of review, and this will be a continual tweaking project until all the members feel like we got something really viable to present to the town council. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I'd appreciate that. We're going to go to member reports, if there's any. Any members have anything to report?
Nope, not at this time.
Go ahead, Joy? Nope?
Oh, I said no, not at this time. Nope.
All right. All right, we had no public comments coming in at
Not that I'm aware of,
in
no.
Beth's office today?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, all right. And I'd like to hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your
Thanks.
time. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time.